Hey guys, this is Red and Blue, and boy, this transfer window seems to be accelerating very nicely. Not only is João Fernandes looking more and more like a done deal for PSG coming from Barca, we're waiting for the papers to be signed, but everything is pointing in the right direction. And so this is looking like a deal that might get finalized in the next couple of days, few hours, whatever it might be. But on top of this, we're now hearing that Atlético Madrid and PSG are talking about the transfer of Korean offensive midfielder Kang-In Lee, who might be leaving PSG to join the Madrid team. Let me take you through it and kind of let you know where I stand, and also, like, more importantly, what does the future look like for this right midfielder, right winger position that's been a thorn on our side for a little bit now. So yeah, let's just dive into it. So apparently the rumor is from Marca. So Marca, Atlético Madrid made the trip to Paris to talk with PSG leadership and are essentially looking at offering about 40 million euros for Kang-In Lee. They've been selling a few players. They've done some smart business in terms of freeing up space in their squad. They've got about 65 million in the kitty, and so they're looking to spend 40 million. It's a player that they've had their eyes on for a long time. In fact, they were our main competition when we brought Kang-In Lee over to Paris, and they never really stopped looking and believing in the player. And so, they're definitely interested. Apparently, they're talking with us. And apparently, what Marca is saying, is that the player is definitely not opposed to it, that he would want to have more game time. And so he's looking at this as something that would be very much of interest to him. So much so that he's apparently talking to PSG to get PSG to lower our expectations for how much he would cost. So that is what Marca is saying. Now we also have the L'Équipe version of it, which just came out. And L'Équipe is singing a slightly different tune. They don't deny that there are conversations between the two clubs and that Atlético Madrid is interested, but they're saying that PSG is not that keen to sell the player, and that for them, like, if anything, like, there will be a conversation next summer, and next summer we'll have to see if the player wants to commit and potentially renew his contract with PSG, or if he wants to go and potentially go back to Spain. But that would be a conversation for next summer. So those are like kind of the two sides of the media arguments that we're hearing on this case. I think for me, just to give you my perspective, I think it makes a lot of sense that this conversation would be happening. I can see the appeal of the player for a club like Atlético Madrid. I can see why the player would be interested as well, and why he would look at that as a good opportunity for him. I still remember last summer when there was, a bit of noise being made around Kang-In Lee, and the fact that, he was seeing himself as someone who should have more game time within this PSG squad, who was maybe a little bit undervalued within the squad, who had the skill set and the capability to be doing more. And I think that translated into him kind of putting his head down and doing the work and really showing in the first half of the season what he can do for this PSG team. At the same time, he's also being moved around a lot. We've seen him, and I honestly really like him in this role, but coming in as a substitute for Vitinha, but also dropping in some really good performances on the right wing, and yeah, being a little bit, a fair bit actually more interesting than what he's been in the past. But I think from a PSG perspective, the knock on Kang-In Lee has always been that, when you put him on the pitch, he ends up being a bit neutral in terms of what he produces. It's a lot of back passes. It's a lot of touch, pass back. And it doesn't really create a lot of opportunities or a lot of differences for PSG. And so, I think right now, the first half of the season is tending to prove that perspective wrong. And so I think, we're left with a player where it's a very, very different conversations that we would have had last summer. Because I think if this kind of offer came through last summer, I don't think there's many PSG fans who would have argued that we shouldn't be taking it. I think everyone would have been in agreement that we could take the money and potentially find a replacement at least equal, if not better. I think having seen what he did in the first half of the season, it's a little bit trickier to make that point, but I think ultimately not impossible. And for me, that's where I end. That's where I end, which is, Kang-In Lee for 40 million. Why not? First, I think like we can probably push a little bit and get a little bit more money out of Atlético Madrid, who, like I've said, have sold a few players and do seem to have a little bit of money in the kitty. I think if we can push that to 45 to 50 million euros, all the better for us. And I think the player is probably worth around that much right now. But I think more than anything, it's like our squad is already short, and I think even with João Fernandes coming in, I don't see him as a potential replacement for Kang-In Lee. I think they're very different kind of players. They play in different positions, and I really, really, really don't think you could replace a Kang-In Lee with a João Fernandes. And so any move out of PSG for Kang-In Lee would be subject to us already having found or having like very serious options to bring in someone to replace him. Because at this position, it's already been a gap for a while. I mean, we've been talking last summer and since then about the fact that we need a right winger with a left foot. And right now, Kang-In Lee is literally like the only option that we have within our squad to be doing that. To be doing the right flank with the left foot, being able to cut back inside, either like, make the shot himself and try to convert himself, or create mayhem by moving into the half space, freeing up space for Hakimi on the right flank potentially. I think it's a position where, we're not really. It's not really like the strongest position in terms of depth and strength that we have in our PSG squad. Obviously, Doué did very well last year playing in this position. Obviously, Dembele also has the skill set to do it. But I think, looking at where we're at, Dembele is now a false nine, and I don't think it makes much sense to push him back to the right flank. Once again, unless like we pick up a top tier number 9 that Luis Enrique is going to be happy with, but within the framework of the current squad, makes no sense to me. And Doué, I think like he remains the starter on the right flank for now, but I think in the long term, he's got probably like a lot more opportunity, and I think he'll be like a lot more impactful, either playing on the left flank, playing as a false 9, in place of or balancing with Dembele, or even in midfield, which we've seen a few times this year. And so I think, long term, there's an opportunity for a player to come in and really like make that right wing space his, knowing that we can afford to have a little bit more depth, we can afford to have a little bit more rotation, especially if Kang-In Lee comes out. And a player like Mbaye, who's also been part of the picture within that position. I think one like is more impactful on the left flank. Mbaye, I really like him a lot more on the other side. And 2 is right-footed, so he doesn't really fit the bill of what we're looking for here. So then the question is asked, like, if we do this, then who could be on the market / who could be good enough and interesting enough for us? And that's where, for me, I've got like 3 names. And first, like, let me talk about the names that I do not put on my list. And that name is Magnus Akliouche of Monaco, which has been a non-stop conversation among PSG fans for the last year and a half. There's been a lot of conversation. I think last season it was quite interesting, and I know that it's been said that Luis Campos and Luis Enrique actually like the player, but honestly, like the first half of his season in Monaco has been not good, and I think to the point where right now, like honestly, personally, like I value Kang-In Lee more than I value Akliouche. That's how bad the first half of this season. So I know a lot of people are saying like, oh, look at Vara, once he wanted to leave, all of a sudden he wasn't playing as well as, which is, it's a fair argument to some extent. But I definitely think like Akliouche hasn't proved as much as Vara. And I think, the decline that we've seen this season is a lot more than what we've seen out of Vara. And so for me, yeah, it could be a potential recruit. Maybe we take a chance. Maybe we go like, oh, the last 6 months, like there's circumstances, and we still believe in the player. But for me, I think one, like if we sell Kang-In Lee, we don't want to buy in a question mark. Kang-In Lee, for all of his fault, is a confirmed player. He's not 18. He's like in the 20, probably like 24, 25, I would say. I'm actually like not even certain. But he's not the youngest player. He's been through things. He's played in Spain before for a while, and like now he has experience as well. And in the makeshift of this squad, where we do want to bring in talent for the right wing position, yeah, we're not looking for a promise. We're looking for a player who can come in and really improve the squad and make an impact and challenge for serious gaming time in serious games straight away. And so, I don't want to bring in. I was looking at the youngsters who play this position, and I was looking at like a player like Carretzas, for example, who I think is very, very interesting and very talented, but he's just not proven enough to be able to come in and for me like fills that spot in the squad. That's also why I think that João Fernandes isn't a like for like replacement in this position. Not only the fact that it's not really his natural place and he's right-footed and so on, but yeah, I do think we need more talent, we need more experience, and we need more expertise than that. And so I've got a few names because I've been doing my homework, and I don't want to leave you guys hanging. So I've got 3 names for you guys, and I think 3 interesting options that we could look at that are more or less doable and that I think would be additive to the squad. The first one that I've got is Savinho of Man City. He's been on his way out for the past 6 months. There's been a long-standing conversation of him going to Tottenham. Obviously, a player that did very well in the past in Girona, hasn't really been at the same level of impact in Man City, despite high promises. He's had a few good games, a few good moments. He's delivering overall, just not at the level that Man City was expecting. And I think for me, like, I would say, like, tough for him because he's still a super young player. I think he's still like less than 20 years old. So he's still very, very early in his career. At the same time, now he's had the experience of going through Girona and fighting for La Liga title. He's had the experience of moving to England, moving to Man City. He's playing with the Brazilian national team. He's played like many games in the Champions League. He's also like very versatile. And I think, it's both an advantage and a question mark in this case because the best time of his career, which was his time in Girona, he was actually playing on the left flank, and in Man City was where he was playing on the right. And so that versatility is great, but at the same time, the squad of PSG is now a massive amount of left wingers that can also play in other places. And so I don't really want to add to that. And the other caveat that we have is that right now he's injured probably for the next couple of months. So it could be like a good long-term option. And I think like this, obviously he's a very young player. So you buy a player not for the next 8 weeks, but for the next 5 years. And so in that context, that makes sense, but it's definitely not going to be immediately operational. And we do have a squad that's relatively short in terms of strength and depth. And so we don't necessarily want to be bringing in a player that's not going to be immediately able to, not only to play straight away, but to start integrating, to start training with the team, to start learning the ways of playing and so on. That takes a while. We know that this PSG is not an easy team to get into. And so having to postpone that by a couple of months, it's essentially saying that it's a player that's not really going to be impactful for us in the second half of this season. So question mark on this, I think like tremendously talented player. I'd be very excited if that's what we decide to go for. He's definitely on the market, and I think like in terms of price, we're definitely in the range where it'd be doable. And so yeah, so I think he's definitely an interesting option. Second option that I had for you guys is one that also like is very, very exciting, and I think he's made a lot of noise, especially this season. It's Matías Soulé of Roma. Argentinian right winger, left-footed, exactly what we're looking at, and he's being talked about a little bit as like, I hate when football world does that, but the new Angel Di Maria, which is really saying a lot. He's been extremely impactful this season in a Roma team that's performing really, really well. He's one of the most creative and impactful wingers on the inward football right now. I think in terms of dribbling, in terms of creating opportunities, but also in terms of shooting from outside of the area, he's doing absolutely like he's second to none. And I think that's something that would be extremely impactful for PSG because we do need wingers who can score more goals. I think that's been one of the flaws of this PSG team in the first half of the season. Is that sometimes we're constrained in terms of where our goals come from, and I think Matías Soulé would really help with that. Would really help create chances, but also be able to convert and score a decent amount of goals on his own. And so I think very interesting name. Roma is obviously a team which financially is known to be struggling. And so there's always opportunity if you come in with the right amount of money to take in their players, even if they're counting on them and even if they're really like top players of their squad. Question mark in this case, we're mid-season, they're fighting for the Italian title. Like, would they really be open to selling right now? Would we have to pay way too much money to get him out? I think it's a fair question mark, but I think definitely a player where we should investigate, we should be looking at it, we should see if there's an option or not, and if there is an option, also players that I absolutely love to see in PSG right now. Finally, third option, coming out of Spain, coming out of Real Sociedad, Japanese winger, Kubo, who I also think a really interesting option. So first, let me take out the kind of the elephant in the room. One of the big appeals and one of the big advantage of Kang-In Lee in PSG is his star power in Asia and in Korea, where he sells us a lot of jersey. A lot of people flying to see him play in Parc des Princes. We've had sponsors that come join us because of Kang-In Lee. And so from that perspective, in terms of the business, in terms of the finance, the player has an outsized impact versus his role in the squad. And I think Kubo, who's Japanese, not Korean, really has the same sort of homegrown star power, where all of a sudden it opens doors for us, it brings in money for us, it sells jerseys for us. And so we might be losing that by losing Kang-In Lee, but all of a sudden we do get that back if we bring in a player like Kubo. So that's kind of the business side of things. Don't get me wrong, I don't think that should be the number one consideration when we decide to recruit and who we decide to recruit. But I'm also not naive, and football is a business, and so those things do matter a great deal for clubs, and so it's something to keep in mind. That being put to the side, it's not the reason why I'm talking about this player, because I do definitely think he's an extraordinary player. In terms of technical quality, in terms of dribbling, in terms of being able to make things happen and create stuff in small spaces, I think he's extraordinary. He's very talented. He's been in Sociedad for a few years now. I think he's at the point where he's probably he's been ready for the next step for a while. And yeah, it's. I think it's funny because it's a very similar profile to what we got from Kang-In Lee when we got him out of Spain. He's a player who's ready for the next stage, who's been extremely impactful in a sort of a mid-tier club. No offense to Sociedad, who I think is a great club, but obviously it's not like tier one of Spain. It's really like that next level. And so, can you take a player like this, bring him into a next club? I think he would have probably like less qualms about like having to make his way into the squad. I don't think a player like him would come in and expect to be a star in the team. I think a Savinho or even like a Matías Soulé, they would come in with a certain standing as a player, and so they would have expectations in terms of their playing time, their positioning, how they're used, their salary, and so on and so forth, which, would be a little bit more tricky for PSG to just like deliver. When a player like Kubo, I can see him like coming in to really fight for his spot. And I think, the raw talent that he has is underused in Real Sociedad. And I think like having him be part of a top team at a top level, all of a sudden, like, yeah, sparks could fly. And I think it's a really interesting profile to bring in, because that really fits with what we're trying to do. We're not trying to bring in the existing superstars of world football. We're trying to bring in the players who have the potential, who have the raw talent, and we can take that last step to become the global superstars of world football. And I think a player like Kubo definitely fits that bill. And I can see him, either starting some game, but even like coming in at the 70th minute in a tricky game with a Ligue 1 team that's playing 5 at the back, and all of a sudden, like, things happen. There's dribbles, there's energy, there's movement, and there's creation. And I think, yeah, that'd be really exciting. I think he could play in different positions as well, working with Luis Enrique. And so, yeah, I think he's definitely a profile that we should be looking at. So essentially, that's kind of what I had for you guys of this Kang-In Lee out in, we don't know now or next summer. This conversation is happening anyway. So for me, this is what I think. These are like the options that I've laid out for you guys. Let me know in the comments, like, what do you think? I know a lot of players typically like don't rate Kang-In Lee like very highly within the frame of the PSG squad, but he's had a great first half of the season. Let me know what you think. What is the price at which we should let him out? And what is your thinking in terms of replacing him? Do you agree with the three options that I laid out? Is there one that's more exciting than the other? Let me know. If you have other idea, also let me know. But for now, if you made it this far, leave a like on the video, counting on you guys. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. And don't forget, Kang out Lee, but ici c'est bye!